What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, January 23rd, 2017, getting on down to the end of the month here and getting into the winter. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A quick reminder that tomorrow, Wayne Madsen will be our on-air guest. He's got a new book out about CIA front companies and new information about blackmail going on by the CIA in the highest levels of our own government. So we're going to be talking about that as well here. And it looks like we've got a caller waiting on the line already. Mary in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mary, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. What's on your mind?
Yeah, my phone's a little cracked. I was just hoping that Trump's going to shut down this violence. I mean, I don't know if you saw some of it with that women's march yesterday.
Yeah, I did.
Which was insanity.
I did.
It was just disgusting.
Well,
and I'm like...
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. It's okay. It's just people, these celebrities, well, especially, I'm going to say Madonna. I mean, she's like, I dream of blowing up the White... I mean, some of these celebrities have really lost me. They're just I'm going to boycott anything from them, anything, even if it's free, because they're just so childish and immature, and they're inciting violence.
Yes, they are.
Like Cher says she's not, but they're inciting violence. And then she said on Twitter, F Donald Trump and F the Secret Service.
Yeah, and, Madonna actually set up these news networks for some major FCC fines because they were covering her live. And she's out there with the F word over and over again. They didn't bleep her out. I mean, in theory.
I know. It's lady, you're 60. She's in her 60s now, correct?
Somewhere up there. I don't know.
Did you learn other vocabulary? Can you speak other words than the F word? I mean, at this point, I'm so tired of hearing it. I did see some of the Alex Jones coverage on the march yesterday, and they were just screaming at him, "You're white male, F you this and F you that." That's all they would say to him. Well, they would never stop and have an intellectual discussion with anybody.
Well, I think Trump's best course of action. Obviously, we want to see the violence contained, but I think Trump's just going to let these people scream and yell and discredit themselves in the eyes of the public. Because they're not winning any popular support with this. I'm starting to think that one of the reasons all these has-been celebrities are out there screaming so much isn't that Donald Trump won. It's all of a sudden having to realize that nobody really cares what their opinion is about anything anymore.
Yeah, they don't. And, it's been happening for a while because, I mean, listening to them, not just Madonna, but Ashley Judd talking about feminine products and some other celebrities talking. Just the words that they were saying were just gross. And I don't consider myself a feminist, even though I'm a woman. I'm a humanist. I'm for anybody. I look at people individually and assess them for the content of their character, like Martin Luther King says.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, when
it's the content of anyone's character that attracts me, nothing else.
Well, long ago, when feminism was about equal pay for equal work, equal access to education, and correct. No. There was a time when feminism actually had a good purpose behind it. And back then,
in the beginning,
I was a supporter and part of it.
Yes.
There's a wonderful book, though, by a lady named Christine Hobbs Sommers. And she wrote this wonderful book, Who Stole Feminism, in which she chronicles how the original equity feminist movement, which was all about equal pay and equal credit and things we could get behind, got hijacked by a bunch of political opportunists who turned it into gender feminism as part of the larger game of identity politics. And just went into this, all men are rapists nonsense and all this other, which... they just get more and more extreme, and past a certain point, you come to understand they're saying these things to be shocking just to get people to pay attention to them. And people aren't paying attention anymore.
No, they're just like, yeah. And I do remember reading that book a while ago, and it's been hijacked. That's why I say now I'm a humanist, because feminism has been hijacked.
Yes.
And it's like, we can't leave the men out of this either. I mean, it's not fair to, like, you know, say men. You know, there's a lot of men that are poor of different cultures and stuff, and, like, why are we dissing them?
See,
that's not...
Again,
I don't believe in doing that.
Again, in the early days of feminism, when it was all about equity feminism, men who were supportive of the movement were welcome. And then all of a sudden, the gender feminists took over and said, "You get out of here. You're a male. All men are potential rapists, and that's all they are." And they alienated the support coming from the males in this country. And they just kept getting more and more extreme. You had Andrea Dworkin was out there saying that feminists should randomly kill men to teach us to be appropriately fearful and keep us in our place. Yeah, and now it's peaking. Yeah, it's peaking now, and people are looking at it and saying, these people, they're crazy. Nothing that they're saying makes any sense whatsoever. Now, Mary, give me a second here, because we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And, but, yeah, I mean, we're going to be going into some examples about some of this stuff a little bit later here.
Okay, I just want to shout out real quick to Ron Gibson, because I'm a YouTuber, and he puts you on every day along with Alex, which is great. So I found out about you, and I really think you're a chill guy, and you have a great resume. And I'm like really impressed with your show. I mean, I watch it every day. Well, you know, and if I can't watch it every day, I catch it when I can. And I'm also hoping that you know, Donald Trump gets wind of you. I know he's got wind of other, you know, I would call them independent media or whatever. I don't want to call them alternate. I think it's just independent people doing their thing. And I really hope he gets wind of you, because when I got wind of you, I'm like, this guy is really chill. I mean, I just like that you're calm and you focus on the facts, which is really, really, really fantastic. So it was great to talk with you. I don't want to hog you. And I'm looking forward to listening to tomorrow's show with Wayne Matson. I adore him. He's so smart. And,
he's got some good stuff. Show. Okay.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So nice to meet you, and have a great. Let's hope this is going to be a great year for us, Michael.
I think it really is. I think we're seeing the corporate media dissolve itself. Donald Trump would be perfectly justified in bringing some of these antitrust, anti-monopoly laws against the corporate media to basically break them on up. Anyway, Mary, we're going to let you go.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Michael, you take care. Thank you so much.
And we're going to switch over to Ken in Fort Worth. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, they had some gals from Hawaii riding in the cowboy parade in Fort Worth a couple weeks ago. That's far, far west. Hey, go look at Fort Worth Star Telegram. You can read it.
Okay.
It was kind of cute. They had their own dresses, and they rented some horses. They stuck them on I get the fire, but anyway, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Was Kennedy's limo or Trump's new limo, which one was longer? Which one's longer? That's the question. And also, Eisenhower and Trump both went from private citizens right to the presidency.
Yes, that's certainly true. And there
have other ones, but you can hunt it. You can find out which ones.
Okay.
But that's true. Talk to you later. Nice talking.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Ralph in New York City. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, say Happy New Year to you. It's been a while to call you. And I want to ask you a question. What does the TPP agreement Trump just signed today mean for the country right away?
No. He did not sign the TPP. He signed an executive order pulling out of the TPP, and that's a really good thing, because the TPP and the TTIP were both instruments of this enforced economic globalism. One of the things a lot of people were very concerned about, and the reason it had actually stalled, it was an attempt to, first of all, ban GMO labeling all over the world, and then to force other countries to buy America's GMO agriculture, which they don't want. So basically, Donald Trump just pulled the plug on all of that nonsense.
And Obamacare, what would it mean now? Now he just signed executive orders on that.
Well, they're going to tear that down, and they're going to replace it with something. We have to be careful that people who lost their previous health insurance when Obamacare came along, somebody's going to have to pick that back up again. Some of these insurance companies might look at these older, chronically ill people and say, well, we don't want to sell you coverage, so there has to be something there. But the very first thing that Donald Trump ought to do is simply remove those IRS penalties for not having an Obamacare-compliant insurance policy, so that people can go on out and find policies that actually work for their unique circumstance and situation. One of the biggest, most arrogant things we see coming from government, and for that matter large corporations, is they treat every single human as if they're an identical carbon copy of the one next to them, and it doesn't work that way. That's why certain medications will have serious side effects for a certain part of the population, like prescription antidepressants. Only a certain segment of the population are being driven crazy by them, but that's because these people are genetically and biochemically different than the rest of the population. The same thing with other vaccine side effects. We're all slightly unique in our biochemistry. I mean, look at the issue of blood typing, so we have to be very, very careful about that.
Exactly. I mean, because me as a former Desert Storm veteran myself, going back in the '90s, when I go to the VA, I see all my fellow comrades and guys in my platoon that are really jacked up, really bad, and their fear about what's going to happen with Trump in office. You know, these people got Medicaid, they got Medicare, and they fear what's going to happen. So I just want your opinion. What will this affect for a lot of us who are veterans?
Well, we don't really know yet, and remember, the corporate media has been putting out a lot of absolute nonsense that if Donald Trump wins, he'll do this, he'll do that, and apparently our school system is having to deal with all these traumatized children who were fed all this pro-Hillary propaganda all last year, and now Trump has won the election, and they're all traumatized. They actually believe all these things that they've been told. And we don't really know until Trump starts taking action. Then we've got something that we can go on. But I can't imagine that Donald Trump, especially when he's talking about a stronger U.S. military, even though it's going to be pulled back to the United States, I don't see him turning his back on the veterans. Certainly, we have to look at...
Even the disabled, right?
Yeah, especially the disabled. I think we need to look back on the last 8 years where the government gave a lot of lip service about we're going to take care of our veterans, and then you look at what actually happened to them, just being ignored. The paperwork was a mess. They were fudging the records to make it look like these people were getting medical care, and they weren't. They were just being put out to pasture in the hope that they would die. And I don't... let's put it this way. It could hardly be any worse under Trump than it was under Obama, and that gives us every expectation that it'll be better.
I mean, is he any better than Ronald Reagan back in the '80s, or he will be a lot better?
I think he's going to be a lot better, because you need to remember that Ronald Reagan was hired as an actor to play the president, and behind him was George Herbert Walker Bush actually calling most of the shots, especially during Reagan's second term when the Alzheimer's began to set in.
Exactly. All right. Everyone's fearful because Trump in office now. They're fearing people living on Social Security disability. They're getting Medicare and Medicaid from the government.
They're afraid.
Something can happen.
They're afraid of an illusion. They're afraid of this illusion of what Trump is going to do that was put out by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the corporate media. And the corporate media have not learned their lesson. They're still out there spinning and distorting and twisting. And you need to basically see what Trump himself is going to say and do, and stop being afraid of these painted monsters on the wall, courtesy of CNN, MSNBC, and so forth.
Right, exactly. All right, Mike, you're beautiful. Thank you very much for your help. I tell all the veterans that I spoke to you.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. We're going to switch.
Thank you, Mike. You're beautiful.
We're going to switch over to Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Mike, I'm a little worried about this electoral reform. I know it's President Trump's first business day, and I know you sent a letter to the White House, so thank you for that. But it just seems like electoral reform is just not a priority. I haven't heard anything, and and you've said it before. The corporate media and even Fox, the one day that I watched it on the inauguration, they completely ignore and dismiss the whole issue of fraud, and it's even when it's mentioned that Hillary won the popular vote, this claim goes unchallenged. It's left unchallenged. So
oh, absolutely. The reason for that is very simple. This centralized tabulating privately owned company, it goes by the handle Voters News Service, although they're constantly changing their name because they don't want a lot of attention. It's owned by the TV news networks and a couple of key papers, the Washington Post and the New York Times, I think. And they're part of the problem of the rigged election. So, of course, they're never going to report on it. They're always going to say that even the mere suggestion our elections aren't honest is an attack on democracy. Now, fixing this crooked election system it probably can sit on a back burner for, I'd say, about 6 months. But Donald Trump is already talking about his 2020 campaign. Has already come up with the slogan, Keep America Great. At some point, he's going to have to deal with this because I'm sure he and his advisors are smart enough to realize that the vote riggers are going to double down next election. They're going to try twice as hard. They're going to have twice as many dead voters. They're going to have twice as many illegal immigrants. They're going to rig twice as many of the electronic voting machines. Unless we get a system in place where all of these means of cheating are just designed out of it. And I did write this article. And, in fact, if you go up to the top of my main page, that little sub-menu of gray, it's now in the first slot, how to have honest elections. And I don't claim this system is perfect, but it certainly makes it much more difficult to cheat an election and much harder to hide it as opposed to our current system, which frankly seems like it's designed to facilitate stealing elections and to hide the same. And we've got to get rid of it. We've got to absolutely replace it.
Absolutely. Well, please keep us posted on any response that you may receive from the White House.
I certainly will.
Mike, last question. Can you explain, I don't know, either on this broadcast or in the future, what the whole Arab Spring was about? Because I'm confused, because I consider myself, you know, pretty knowledgeable about the world and international relations, and it just seems like the U.S., they had these secular leaders like Mubarak in Egypt, who were, I would say they were doing the U.S.'s bidding. Maybe not as much as the U.S. would like, but what was the whole idea of getting rid of these guys, and in Tunisia as well, and replacing them with Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and these other Islamist parties in Tunisia and elsewhere? I'm confused. What's the end game in this whole thing?
Well, unfortunately, there is no end to any of this. What it is the United States would see a given country where the pro-U.S. leaders have brought the people to the edge of a rebellion, and rather than let it happen and wind up with an independent government that is not going to do what the U.S. says, the U.S. tries to get ahead of the revolution. They send in non-governmental organizations, and they basically try and hijack the genuine political uprising and steer it in a direction that puts their puppets into power. And we saw that in Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973. They tried to do it again in Iran in 2009, but the Iranian people were very happy with Ahmadinejad and certainly did not warm to the idea of the son of the Shah returning to the peacock throne. And so that's been that whole color revolution, Arab Spring. That's just a collective name for all of these covert operations to overthrow the democratically elected governments of these countries and basically set up a system where the people no longer are able to democratically choose their leaders. And then they plop somebody in there who's kept in there with rigged elections like Poroshenko in Ukraine to do the U.S. bidding. But it's starting to really come apart. It looks like the U.S. is on basically getting out of Syria, going to be getting out of Yemen. Donald Trump does not go along with all these covert overthrows because he understands it's undermining America's reputation around the world. More importantly, it makes trade difficult when the country you're trying to trade with, especially for their oil, understands the government is trying to overthrow their leadership in order to get a discount on the oil. That makes business negotiations very difficult.
Oh, Mike, did you see Russia's use of their long-range bombers to bomb the rebels in Syria, the terrorists in Syria, in Deir ez-Zor? I think it was may have been a response to what the U.S. did with the B-2s in Libya. In fact, Brie Hume on Fox was saying, oh, this was done to send a message to Beijing and Moscow, as if Putin was shaking in his boots because the U.S. sent some B-2s to Libya. But this may have been a response to that, though, what Russia just did.
Well, the Russia issue has just changed dramatically. Need to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
God bless Putin and Tu-22 long-range bombers.
Well, what's really significant, though, is now U.S. warplanes are flying together with the Russian warplanes against the real terrorists in Syria. So this is going to be the end of this whole attempt to covertly use these terror groups to effect a regime change in Syria. The policy is gone. As soon as Trump was sworn on in, the U.S. doctrine in Syria went from, we got to find a way to get Assad, and we're going to just help the Russians clean up this mess and try and forget it ever happened.
The only thing that's not gone is the neocon, neoliberal banker agenda, because by Trump winning is basically the decline of empire, where countries are going to start going on their own in terms of doing their own trade that's beneficial to each country's population, not as a total, because you can't have a globalist economy where it benefits one group over another, because that's why we got so much of the problems we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's money junkyism on a planetary scale. And Soros' dream of a global government, global empire is falling apart. And he's out there, he's still flinging money. Apparently, some 50 of these groups that were behind this so-called Women's March are being funded by George Soros.
Yeah, George Soros, he's like a threat to actually national security, Mike, because you got MoveOn.org, Black Lives Matter. They, with the media, will stir up a revolution.
Soros is technically in violation of the USA Patriot Act, in that he's trying to encourage violence to coerce a change in the political agenda, and that's defined as an act of terror under the USA Patriot Act. Book him, Daniel.
Well, you know what would defeat? But you know what would defeat him and his group is, like Thomas Jefferson said, the most patriotic thing somebody can do is be a well-informed citizen. You know, we have a lot of, I hate to say it in our country, ill-informed citizens. You know, Mike, and there's a lot more than there was, but there's still a lot of work to do, and people shouldn't give up.
Oh, no, we're not giving up. We're winning. This is the year of the rise of the independent media. And, yes, there are a lot of useful idiots and morons still out there who are still convinced what they see on the TV screens from CNN and MSNBC has some connection with reality. But they're crumbling. And it's just like the extremist feminists. Their claims are getting more and more hysterical and extreme, still trying to grab people's attention. And once you reach that point where you're just having to get more and more outlandish in your claims, you're basically in the final throes of collapse.
Is it, like, extremely dangerous? Not all of the protesters, but there's a small amount, brown shirt tactic fascist. Isn't it amazing how they call Trump a fascist? Who's the ones on the street? That's simple to see. Even on the news, you can use against them. So when they show all these protesters on the street, it shows you the brown shirt tactics that a small element used. But unfortunately, the brown shirt element gets more attention. You know what I mean? Because they use that.
Yeah, that's exactly why they do it. They don't think Donald Trump is really a fascist. He's obviously a capitalist. Okay, but they know the word carries an emotional burden with it. Oh, he's a Nazi, he's a fascist, he's a misogynist, he's this, and they're just throwing words to carry negative connotations. And people will just latch onto that and say, oh, well, CNN told me he's a reincarnation of Hitler. It must be so. CNN wouldn't lie to me. But the reality is the words are not accurate descriptions. They're being chosen purely for their emotional weight.
And Mike, real quick, I want to switch over back to Russia and China real quick.
Yes.
How Russia is the largest supplier of energy needs to China, and that's going to be growing more moving forward because they are, like I said before, they are the next empire.
Yes.
The West is in decline, the East is in revival there.
All right, Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take a break. Back with one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines because I got a bunch of news I need to get through. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got a bunch of news to get through. Frank in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike. Yeah, the Women's March on D.C., I think it's totally scripted because the subject matter they were not allowed to speak about is a subject matter that affects all of us. For an example, they didn't call about pulling out of Afghanistan. We've been there for, what, going on 16 years now. These ridiculous wars that all these foreign entanglements were in. And it was a woman that was from Palestine. And I was hoping she had the guts to speak the truth. But she completely avoided the issue of aid to Israel, which we just signed the pact over 10 years. I believe it's $38 billion.
Yes.
Also about the, letting go of the Israeli spy, Jonathan Paul, allowed to go back into Israel, I believe he was allowed to.
Well, this woman's march, I mean, they didn't have anything substantive. It was all Trump is bad, Trump is this, Trump is evil, white men are evil. This so-called all-inclusive women's march refused to allow a pro-choice women's group to take part. And it was just all about screaming and crying that their liberal utopia is coming down around their ears.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that struck me is one of the speakers said that a woman only makes 78 cents to a man. Now, if that was true, corporate America would be laying off all men and hiring women at a lower wage to increase their corporate profits. It's just unfathomable to think what they're saying. If that was a true statement, my goodness, women would be the premium to be hired because you could pay a lower wage.
You're absolutely right here, and that claim that women are only making 70 cents to a man's dollar is a cooked number, like the unemployment figures. And part of what offsets it is the fact that, men are expected to go to work and follow that career path, and the stay-at-home dad is still a very, very rare thing to see here. But women will get into business and they'll work those lower-level, lower-paying jobs, and then they decide maybe that they want to get married and have children, and they drop out before they reach those higher-paying jobs. So it isn't this evil male patriarchy. It's just the economic realities of a workforce that, as it ages, tends to be more and more predominantly male.
I agree. Absolutely, Mike. Great points. But like I said, this wasn't a true march for women's rights. I believe this was a scripted, staged event, and they were told to avoid the subject matter that really, really Americans should be talking about.
Well, they avoided the subject matter of anything that perpetuates the globalist agenda, because that's why Soros was signing the checks. And more people are saying we have to be very careful. They're not trying to set up a new Maidan here to bring down our elected president by violence and impose a dictatorship on us. And it's a possibility, although I don't see it as likely to succeed here. Because people are better informed, they're communicating with each other. Now, since the end of World War II, the U.S. government has succeeded at these covert operations only about half the time. They don't have a really good batting average on it. The last big one they tried was Iran in 2009, and that one fell flat on its face, and I think it's going to fall flat on its face here. Anyway...
I hope so. Yeah, thank you so much, Michael.
All right, Frank, we're going to let you go here. We're going to close the phone lines. I need to get into some stories here. So everybody is talking about Donald Trump. He's already out there signing executive orders. He signed one to basically say everybody has to pull back from this enforcement of Obamacare, and I think that they ought to just remove that IRS penalty right now so that people can go to health insurance companies that are not necessarily in compliance with Obamacare, where they'll probably get a much better deal on that one here. Now, Rudy Giuliani is out there, and he's getting fed up with the corporate media right now, and he says it's time for the corporate media to just come on out. All of these prostitutes and correspondents and the network anchors, it's time for them to stand up and admit they have an anti-Trump bias, they have a pro-liberal bias, and everybody sees it, and it's kind of pointless for them to pretend that we're not all seeing it. And Giuliani is saying that the venom coming out of corporate media is just enormous, and he's absolutely right. We're literally seeing a war between the White House and the corporate media, and between the independent media and the corporate media, and it is a metaphorical war to the death. Now, apparently somebody over at the U.S. Department of the Interior, the National Park Service, apparently during the inauguration ceremony, tweeted out something that was not very flattering of Donald Trump. They've now been forced to apologize on that. Guys, Trump is now the boss, and you should remember that. Now, everybody's talking about Madonna. She got up there. She was using the F word. It went out live all over these TV news networks, getting them into trouble, and talked about blowing up the White House. And everybody said there should be an investigation, and the Secret Service says, yes, they're going to investigate Madonna for saying she wanted to blow up the White House. Now, Madonna is backpedaling now. She's gone out on her little Instagram account saying, well, it's out of context, when I'm saying I want to blow up the White House, you're just taking it the wrong way here. It's wildly out of context. No, it isn't Madonna. That was not much gray area in there when you say you want to blow up the White House. Now, getting on to the Women's March, as that last caller was saying, it is a scripted joke. These people are, for the large part, being paid to be there. We all know about all the ads that were in all the Craigslist and all the rest of that. And there was this wonderful video. It's up at WhatReallyHappened.com, where this female reporter for a conservative news site is talking to all these Women's March protesters saying, do you think Trump should be impeached for the rape of Juanita Broaddrick? Oh, yes, we got to get rid of Trump. He raped Juanita. How about Paula Jones? Oh, yeah, we did that. Clue time? Okay, that was Bill Clinton who was accused of raping Juanita Broaddrick and Paula Jones and all those other women. These people marching in the Women's March don't have a clue. They don't know anything about what's been going on. They're just there for a paycheck or to get their face on TV, or so they can feel, I was out there marching in Washington, D.C. Now, some of the signs are very clever and insightful, and some of them make no sense at all. There was a woman out there with a sign that says, I dream women will one day have the same rights as guns. What on earth does she mean by that? Does that mean if I ask a woman out on a date, I have to wait 15 days for a background check before we can go out? Does it mean if I'm on a date with a woman, I can't take her into a shopping mall or any other woman-free zone? If I take a woman out for a drive, do I have to lock her in the trunk? I mean, it's nonsense. And you know how to get a feminist really, really angry at you? Just dare them to name one legal right men have that women do not. They can't, and they get flustered, and they say, oh, but we're discriminated against, we're this, we're that. I'm not a success because of you evil straight white males. It's identity politics. It's victimhood. These people want a reason to not take responsibility for their own life decisions, and that's what the liberals trade in. Yes, you're a druggie and you're this and you're that, but it's not your fault. And if you will give me money and vote for me, I will give you special legal protections against your imagined oppressors. By the way, did you know that Linda Sarsour, who's a co-founder of this Women's March, defends Sharia law? She's out there tweeting saying Sharia law is reasonable once you read the details. It makes a lot of sense. Really? Does that include genital mutilation? It's amazing. Now, apparently an anti-Trump protester made a mistake, thought a white person standing next to them was a white supremacist who was going to attack him, and he shot the guy. Now, I felt threatened. It's okay for me to shoot. The police have got him. Investigation. Now, Sheila Gunn Reid was a reporter for the Rebel Media and was assaulted at the Women's March. This guy just comes on up and just punches her. Whatever happened to love trumps all and tolerance and all this other stuff the liberals say? So basically, the Rebel Media put out a $1,000 reward for information leading to the perpetrator's arrest, and it worked. Thanks to the age of the Internet. They found the guy, Dion Buse, and now he's been arrested. See, that power of the Internet works both ways. Now, I think the nadir of all of this nonsense was hit. There's a video, this was caught on video, where there was a discussion, not violent, a discussion going on between pro-Trump and anti-Trump protesters. And one of the anti-Trump protesters set a Trump supporter's hair on fire. You can see it right on the video. Just reaches up with a cigarette lighter and flicks it. And they beat the flames out on this girl's back. But I mean, that right there, seriously, they literally set her hair on fire. Burn the heretics, burn the heretics. Get all these conservatives, these straight white males, and tie them to the stake and burn them. Seems to be the mindset out there. And like I said, Donald Trump is actually better off just letting these people continue to destroy their own public image. Remember what I said a while back about liberals being arrogant in their ignorance? Apparently there was a situation where there was this woman getting ready for a plane flight, and she found she was sitting next to a Trump supporter, and she makes a big scene. How dare you? You have this, and demands that the Trump supporter be thrown off the airplane. And to their credit, the flight crew threw the woman off. And we're seeing this in a lot of places where these Hillary supporters are getting on public transportation. They see a Make America Great hat. They cause a ruckus, and they're being asked to leave. Now, apparently at the Women's March over in Berlin, the women's group was chanting Aloha Akbar, or Aloha Snack Bar, or whatever it is that they say. So even the foreign media is looking at this and saying, what the heck is going on here? And there was an article that came out of the Danish media confirming what we already knew, that George Soros wrote the checks for most of this to happen. So you have all these people running around Inauguration Day, they're breaking windows at the Bank of America, they're breaking windows at the McDonald's, and they're out there saying, yes, we're protesting, it's our First Amendment. No, it isn't. The First Amendment does not give you a right to be violent, only to speak and to be heard. And so the 230 protesters who were arrested for committing violence on Election Day are going to be charged with felony rioting. That carries a potential 10 years in prison and a $25,000 fine. And I can just see these 230 people already out there saying, Soros didn't warn us about that. Is he going to post the bail money? Will he pay the fines? No, he's not. Because you're a useful idiot, and your use is now over. Now, I'm going to speculate here that Donald Trump is going to wait for all of this stuff to calm down, and then he's going to commute all these sentences. Because the last thing he needs is a couple of hundred liberal martyrs in prison. And that would be the smart thing for him to do. And Donald, while you have your commutation pen out, I'd like to put in a plug for Leonard Peltier. He really deserves to be let out of prison, especially since it doesn't appear he committed the crime he was convicted on. So basically, Paul Joseph Watson is out there saying, you need to remember, the thing about democracy is you don't cancel it when you don't get the result you wanted. And if that's the way you want to live, maybe you should be living somewhere else like North Korea. Boy, do you remember in the run-up to the election and the big stink they were all making about, you know, Trump might not gracefully accept the outcome of the election. And then Trump won the election. And whoo boy, did the Hillary supporters and the liberals just go ballistic? Not our president, not our president. Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of observers around the world, and this article's from FortRuss.com, are saying we could be looking at an attempt to start a Maidan here in the United States of America. A color revolution, bought and paid for by George Soros to use violence and civil unrest to drive Donald Trump from power, to drive the entire democracy from power, and replace it with a dictatorship. Because it doesn't look like Soros is ready to give up yet. Now then, by the way, some of the women who organized that women's march against Trump marched during the day, and that same night went to the inaugural event. Somehow or other they had invitations. Seems like a double standard. I hate Trump. I hate Trump. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to go. Trump's throwing a party. Now, David Brock, who is basically the founder of Media Matters, which is funded by George Soros, is out there already setting the stage. We have to impeach Donald Trump for high crimes and misdemeanors. And they're grasping at straws. They're already out there saying that Donald Trump may be in violation of the Emoluments Clause because some of his buildings, his offices in his real estate, which is now under the control of his sons, by the way, are rented by foreign governments. And that represents a form of foreign corrupt payments. I mean, compared to the Clinton Foundation, that's pretty low key. Now, speaking of the Clinton Foundation, the foundation is pretty much at this point dead. As soon as Hillary lost the election, all of those foreign donations just stopped, dried up. So Hillary is out there planning her next move. She's out there talking about having more books ghost written for her, speaking tour, and apparently is dealing with the reality that she will not return to public life anytime soon, possibly for the remainder of her life. We still don't know about what's really going on with her health. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And an alert listener just wrote in and mentioned the executive order that Donald Trump signed regarding Obamacare apparently does, in fact, end the IRS penalties. So you are now free to go on out and find health insurance that is going to work for you. Instead of this one-size-fits-all, let's make the health insurance companies rich scam that we've all had to live under. Now then, moving on here, the intelligence community, or at least its leadership, seems to be at war with Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has made a point of saying the friction is political. The top-level appointees and the ordinary rank-and-file members of the intelligence community don't really seem to have a dog in this particular hunt. But there's going to be some changes around town. First of all, Brennan's out. He's now former director of the CIA. And Trey Gowdy has now been appointed to the House Intelligence Committee, which gives him legal authority for oversight on these various intelligence agencies. And so Trey Gowdy is now in a position to go on in and say, where was your proof when you did this story about Donald Trump and the prostitutes? And that thing just went all over the globe. My wife is a big fan of the Graham Norton show on BBC. And we watched the last segment on the DVR, and he's opening up with this story as if it's true. So all of a sudden, I'm not such a big fan of Graham Norton here. Now, Sean Spicer has had his first official press conference as White House spokesperson and basically took the entire corporate media to task for their incessant lies. And right now, there literally is a war going on between, who's going to arrogate the mantle of trustworthy news reporter. And one of the big issues, of course, was that ginned-up photo trying to make it look like hardly anybody showed up to Trump's inaugural. And we know that the photo that they were showing of Trump's inauguration was actually taken a few hours before. And apparently this was from Reuters. And Reuters is saying, well, we were the only ones up there on the top of the Washington Monument. No, they weren't, because the other image that we have showing a huge crowd was from CNN, from the top of the Washington Monument. Apparently these people are so used to lying, they can't even start to tell the truth. Maybe they're afraid we'll figure out how to tell the difference here. But the time has come to acknowledge fully, for all of us, and this includes Donald Trump himself, corporate media lies to us, has lied to us all along. We've spent our entire waking life being lied to by that corporate media. And it's time to go on back and look at what else they've lied about, including wars of aggression and Israel. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're still closing the phone lines because I got a lot of stuff to get through. We'll probably open up the phone lines in the next hour. And we're really seeing the corporate media start to tear itself apart. And apparently over at Comedy Central, one of their writers, Steven Spinola, basically has called Barron Trump a date rapist to be. This is part of that whole militant feminism thing of the 1990s. All men are potential rapists, and that's all they're ever going to be. Which is Susan Brown Miller, I think, said that. Now, I don't know about the corporate media, but in the independent media, we have a line. You don't go after the family. You don't go after the kids. You don't attack the spouses. It's hands off. It's probably the one thing I actually agree with the mafia about. You don't go after the families. But apparently at Comedy Central, yeah, let's make fun of this 10-year-old boy who might be dealing with some impairment issues. Let's make fun of him and say he's going to be a date rapist to be. And this is an act of desperation to try and get more attention by Comedy Central. I mean, after Jon Stewart left The Daily Show, there hasn't really been much of anything on the Comedy Channel I feel like looking at anyway. Now, there's a story that came out in State of the Nation 2012 saying that corporate media now poses an existential threat to the American Republic. And yes, that is very, very true, because for decades, the corporate media has been pushing the globalist, socialist agenda. And when Trump came on out with his slogan, "Make America Great Again," they piled on. Oh, how can you even... It's racist to think of America first. It's anti-Semitic to think of America first. We're all globalists and socialists today. And no, we're not. The United States is a constitutional republic with a democratically elected leadership from among ordinary people. That's how it's set up. And if you don't like it, go live somewhere else. Now, apparently, the White House is starting to openly talk about relations with the media, because the media seems to feel they should be in control of the American people's minds. They make a huge amount of money by claiming that we control what America thinks, and they're losing that, and they're in an absolute blind panic. And apparently, there was this interview over at NBC News, and Chuck Todd was interviewing Conway, and Conway just comes on out and says, we're going to have to rethink our relationship with the media. And yeah, because the media is very clearly adversarial against the incoming Trump administration. So a lot of people are saying, what is to happen now? What is going to happen now? Well, there are some things that Trump ought to consider doing. One, stop this idea that if somebody works for a major media corporation, they should have automatic access to the White House. And that's already happened. Maggie Haberman over at the New York Times has had her White House press credentials yanked. Second, stop giving interviews to the corporate media. They're building their audience on your fame. Stop letting them play that game. Just ignore them. Start spending more communication with the independent media. And finally, and this article has about another several beyond this, but this is the one that's really important. It's time to have antitrust investigations into the corporate media's monopoly. And yes, there are 6 corporations, so they can say, well, see, no one person's owning it all. But have you ever seen those videos that Conan O'Brien puts together, where they'll have clips from network affiliates all across the country reading the exact same copy from their teleprompters word for word for word for word? Now, the corporate media, in addition to its war against Donald Trump, is at war against the independent media. And we have to be careful we do not get tripped up and opened up for lawsuits. And the corporate media is facing an uphill battle because they have a reputation for lying. And here in the independent media, we're cheating. We're using the truth. And the corporate media is trapped by its own business model of lying for profit. They can't start telling the truth, or they don't get those big fat paychecks anymore. So all they can do is try and sabotage the credibility of the independent media, and to nobody's surprise, once again, these well-worn poison-the-well hoaxes are being flooded onto the Internet. The no plane at the Pentagon, chemtrails, HAARP, the Earth is really flat, and, of course, the claim that the Apollo moon landings were faked. It's time for the independent media to realize, yes, it very much is a real war, and the other side likes to fight dirty, and caution is justified. We have to be more professional in our conduct than the professionals. We have to conform to the highest standards of journalistic practice as journalism once was in this country. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, over at Cambridge University, scientists are probably asking for huge amounts of funding to plan for what they're calling is a fake news vaccine. Now, in this case, it's a metaphor. They're not actually coming up with some kind of a shot that they will give you and you will blindly trust CNN overnight. But what they're talking about, and we've heard this before, of demanding the public education system brainwash children to trust MSNBC, CNN, ABC, NBC, and to automatically assume anything they see on the Internet is absolute junk and nonsense. In other words, their solution to the fact that their brainwashing isn't working is to crank up the brainwashing again. Now, turning over to the war zones here, there are tremendous changes, developments going on since Trump took office last Friday. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, was over at a news conference and saying that Trump and Putin see eye to eye on foreign policy. They both want to defeat ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they want to avoid interfering in other countries. Just let people live their own lives and do trade with them. And we're already seeing the change in policy from the U.S. side because now Russian warplanes have just flown their first combat missions in Syria side by side with U.S.-led coalition aircraft. And they're all really going after the terrorists this time. The Syrian army is rapidly advancing in the direction of the ISIS stronghold of al-Bab. Clock is running out on them. ISIS is behaving like a bunch of spoiled brats. Apparently, they decided to destroy part of the Roman theater in Palmyra, just to show how butch they are. Now then, I've been talking about Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's from right here in Hawaii. And she and Dennis Kucinich went to Syria on a fact-finding trip, and they have confirmed what we already knew. The Obama administration was funneling money to ISIS through the CIA and Saudi Arabia. But the people who still want Assad out in Syria are not giving up. They're trying to repackage and rebrand their plans to sell them to Trump. They're going to go on in and say, well, we have to still get Assad out. We have to do this, we have to do that. And Trump is going to say, why? How does it help the American people? How does it bring jobs to this country? How does it repair our infrastructure? To be messing around with other countries. It's going to be a very, very, very tough sell. Over in Iraq, Iraq's forces have stormed the last ISIL-controlled neighborhood in eastern Mosul. That's coming apart as well. This whole dream of breaking up Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and forming a new independent Kurdistan has pretty much fallen apart. Now, over in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia is acting as the U.S. proxy to bomb the Yemenite people into forgetting this idea about ruling their own country and accepting U.S. puppet rule, the internationally approved government, there are 1.5 million children suffering severe malnourishment because of the blockade. It is a humanitarian crisis. Now, turning toward the economic news, China says it's ready to assume the world leadership, and it says Western democracy is flawed. Well, they're certainly right about that one. They're absolutely, absolutely right about that. Our election system is a disgrace. And the behavior of Hillary's supporters since they lost the election is embarrassing. Now, despite a lot of negative commentary about China's economic realities, they're still in a much better position than the United States for a very simple reason. They manufacture products to sell, something the U.S. felt they could walk away from and then complicate with that GMO agriculture. Now, Donald Trump is out there telling business leaders he wants to cut regulations by 75% or maybe even more. And this is definitely going to be a business-friendly thing to do, because the vast majority of those regulations do absolutely nothing but justify hiring some Congress member's family to push papers. In many cases, the regulations are not enforced against politically connected businesses. The SEC has not been enforcing regulations against much of Wall Street. The Minerals Management Service wasn't enforcing the regulations against the Deepwater Horizon. Why are we continuing to waste money on these agencies? Why are we continuing to impose hard economic losses on companies trying to do business while dealing with this regulatory burden? One of the biggest areas for gratuitous regulation is out of this human-caused global warming nonsense. And that all needs to be cut loose. Now, foreigners are dumping U.S. debt at a record pace, and our $20 trillion national debt is going to be a crisis. I can't imagine anybody buying U.S. debt unless it's the Federal Reserve, which just prints up more money and just says, yeah, we'll buy back the Treasury bonds, which is not a long-term solution. And as much as I have high hopes for Trump's administration, I fear that the economic realities may be a problem that even he cannot handle. And we have to be appropriately prepared for that as well. Now, over in Russia, one of their ministers has responded to the European Union regarding sanctions and saying, you can have all the sanctions you want. Building bridges with Europe is no longer a priority with Russia because they're making huge amounts of money trading with markets outside the EU. They're simply doing business with the countries that don't have sanctions on them. So who are the sanctions hurting? They're hurting the people of Europe. Now, one of the makers of the iPhone is now talking because of Trump's desire to bring jobs back and his willingness to shape the tax code to encourage that. One of the companies that makes the iPhones is going to have a $7 billion investment in the United States. They're going to be building factories that make the front display screens. And eventually, the entire phone may be made here. But apparently, he's having meetings with these executives, and they're all on board. And all Trump is saying is, if you make it here, if you bring the jobs here, it will be financially advantageous to you. Remember, one of the big reasons we had this huge offshoring of American jobs goes back to the George W. Bush administration, where they literally changed the tax code to make it more attractive for American companies to send their jobs overseas. Now, down in Venezuela, the crisis is out of control. And there's probably going to be a mass exodus from Venezuela to neighboring countries and possibly up to here unless the wall is built. This is now the 6th consecutive economic emergency under Nicolas Maduro's leadership. But it isn't Nicolas Maduro's fault because the U.S. has been waging economic war against Venezuela going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. Because Venezuela has a bad habit of spending their money on the Venezuelan people. They have a bad habit of selling their oil for currencies other than the dollar. And Venezuela has been on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list for those very reasons. Now, do you remember Western Union? When I was a kid, Western Union was telegrams, but in this age of the internet and email and texting, that part of their business went away. And now they're basically a financial transfer service. You can send money by Western Union. It's sort of for people who don't understand PayPal, I guess. They got nailed for colluding with organized crime, and they're going to have to pay a fine of $586 million because they were aiding and abetting wire fraud and money laundering using their system. I'm wondering why they're even going to be allowed to stay in business. If corporations are going to be persons legally, then we need a way to jail a corporation for bad behavior or even a death penalty for a corporation. Because corporations have a tendency, especially financial corporations, to behave as if they're gods incarnate and above the laws. Now then, over in Europe, the response to Donald Trump's inauguration speech has not been very good. The German media is out there saying Trump, by saying we're going to make America great again, has issued a declaration of war against the European Union. He's opposed to these European unions and globalism. Yeah, he is. We all are. But it's amazing how many people in the corporate media around the world seem to have this idea that love of one's own country is a bad thing. That a desire for a people to direct its own nation and its own government in their own best interest is somehow a crime against humanity. That a desire to control our borders, to decide who comes in and does not come into our country, is somehow racist. And it isn't. Because illegal is not a race. And I can understand why the German media is on Trump's case, because he's basically fired up Europe's anti-EU, anti-establishment movement. Everybody's looking at what we just succeeded doing here in the United States and they're saying, wow, we can do it too. Working together, we can bring down the globalist elites one by one by one. And that would be a very, very good thing. So, as I said more than a year ago, this push for a global government has created a political climate leading to global revolution. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines here, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to Europe and the push against globalism, Marine Le Pen is out there saying that Europe is going to wake up in 2017 and really understand that the European Union was never about their benefit. It was about a stepping stone to a global government. And the European people have suffered enormously under the EU, first of all from the predations of the European Central Bank, and second from the flood of refugees pouring across their border in order to dilute their sense of identity. It's an attack on their sense of self here. Now, Geert Wilders, who was speaking at the Europe Populist Conference, saying if we do nothing, we will cease to exist. And he's starting to use Trump's phrase. They're talking about make Europe great again. The Trump phenomenon is just spreading. And the globalists are in a panic. Now, Angela Merkel, as you know, has declared to run for chancellor one more time. A lot of people said it was a very reckless decision. And it's looking more and more like even massive election fraud is not going to save her because polls for her party are dipping even further. Heading down, heading down, heading down, heading down. Okay, now then, over in San Antonio, there was a shooting incident. One person killed, several others injured during a robbery at the shopping mall in the U.S. city of San Antonio. It's gotten a fair amount of media coverage. The one part that they're not really including that should be there is apparently these robbers were stopped by a concealed carry permit holder. But we don't want to tell you when law-abiding citizens stop crime. Might give you the idea that letting ordinary people have guns is a good thing. And actually it is here. Now then, do you remember Dennis Hastert, former Speaker of the House, admitted child rapist, and he was sentenced to 15 months in prison for paying his victims to keep quiet, hush money. Now, he was not sentenced for the sexual crimes, but just for violating bank structuring laws, trying to cover up where the money was going to. Well, now Hastert is out there saying that because his victims, because one of the victims broke his silence and said, yeah, Hastert raped me, he wants his hush money back. Talk about no sense of shame whatsoever. It's amazing. Down in Brazil, there's been a very suspicious death. Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Teori Zavascki was killed just weeks before he was supposed to unveil explosive testimony implicating up to 200 Brazilian politicians in a massive corruption scandal. So, massive corruption is not a problem confined to just the United States of America. You know, the Founding Fathers really had the right idea. Diffuse power and authority across the entire nation. States, counties, individual citizens have rights and authorities and powers. And that central government, you keep it small, you keep it weak. Because as soon as it turns into a tyrannical central ruling authority, it becomes a one-stop shopping center for every corrupting influence in our society. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Wolfgang Halbig. We've had him on the show before. He's a former law enforcement officer, former teacher, and he is currently a school safety assessor and emergency management consultant. And he has been looking at Sandy Hook And he keeps finding more and more indications that it, like the Boston bombing, was a staged incident to push an agenda. And the government is just battling him. They're refusing Freedom of Information Act requests. He's receiving threats to himself and his family. I wish Donald Trump a lot of luck draining the swamp, but I don't think he knows just how deep that swamp goes. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we have all talked about some of these CIA programs. And as you know, the CIA just recently did a document dump, 13 million pages of declassified records, which includes a lot of the documentation about how the CIA was overthrowing foreign governments. And there's a lot of other stuff in there. We've talked many times about MK Ultra and some of the other blue sky, ridiculous nonsense the CIA gets into. And apparently one of the documents in this document dump refers to a Project Stargate, which I'm annoyed because that's also the name of a movie I worked on, which apparently was one of several programs in which the CIA tried to validate that there were supernatural abilities out there that could be exploited for weapons of war. Find somebody who could, like, give nightmares to foreign leaders and all this other nonsense. My goodness. All right, let's see. We're going to take some phone calls. John in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? John, are you there? Okay, I guess we lost John. Let's go over to Randy in Ontario. Aloha, Randy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, thank you. During the inauguration, especially at the beginning, I noticed about half a dozen or more of the police or military came down the steps, and I haven't heard much about what happened there. I did hear a rumor about there was two signals of a nuke, warnings or whatever. But I just don't know what happened with that, what they were doing there, what was the problem?
Well, it looked to me like they were delivering messages here. I mean, they didn't look like they felt there was any immediate danger of any kind. In fact, they kind of looked bored.
They were standing right behind them like that, very serious. Of course, they don't move, so I didn't know if there was something going on. Yeah, I'm so happy for you guys in the States. I'm really happy. I hope it works out really good. I was so excited. I stayed up till 3:30. It was great. And on the inauguration, other than Trump becoming the president in front of everybody, the second thrill I had was watching that helicopter go with the Obamas.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
I am still annoyed that they got to take that 747 to Palm Springs when he was no longer officially the president. And I can imagine technically, he can't be allowed into that upper deck where all the communication gear is.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Unbelievable. But I'm really happy. I'm really happy and so excited for you. And we got our election coming up in 2 years, and we have a mini Trump, sort of, maybe.
Yeah, I've been seeing that.
O'Leary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck here, and like I said, it does feel like the entire world, all of humanity, is all of a sudden waking up to this globalist plan, and they're all starting to pull back from it.
Oh, I'm so excited. I really am. I was so scared. I feel much better.
Yeah, me too.
I'm really happy for everybody. It's good.
Anything?
Now, if everyone grow up a bit, that'd be great.
Well, we definitely, these liberal whiners are out there, and again, they're not creating a very positive public image. And that is, if this is an attempt to have a new Maidan or color revolution, that's their biggest failing right now, because the rest of the people of the United States of America are not going to look on these people and their behavior with any kind of sympathy. And if there's no sympathy, there will be no support.
Yeah. And regarding Helbig, he's got a court date going with one of the men, with a kid, had a kid or something, coming up. John B. Wells on Care by the Midnight has interviewed him and talked to him quite often and keeps up to date on that.
Yes.
He's doing an incredible job.
Well, I think the American people are finally waking up. not to the fact that the U.S. government lies, because we already knew that. They're waking up to the sheer scale of the lies. And that is taking a lot of people, they're literally in a state of shock that our government could be this dishonest with the American people.
It'd be nice if everybody get a copy of the Trevor Loudon's movie, The Enemies Within.
Yes, very much so.
Unbelievable. Very good. Thanks for your time, Mike. I really appreciate it.
All right, we're going to let you go and switch over to Joe in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. There's a story out on the web and on a website called whatdoesitmean.com, and on YouTube, this early morning hours, there was a FBI raid on the CDC in Atlanta, which I hope it's true. I just haven't heard it from anyone else.
Well, that's a good thing to notice because, frankly, what does it mean? They'll go with stories that turn out to be less than 100% accurate. In fact, what does it mean, I think, is a website that's set up so the corporate media can point to it and say, see, there's nothing but kooks and nuts out there. And I don't link to anything coming off of that website. First of all, the author is supposed to be one Saoirse Fall, and that's not even his real name. His real name is David Webb, I think, and he actually lives just a few blocks from CIA.
Okay, so it's probably a phony story.
It's probably a phony story. We'd all like it to be true, and with Robert Kennedy Jr. in charge of that Safety Commission on Vaccines, it may become true. And yeah, it would be kind of nice. And CDC is already out there with a media campaign saying, you have to trust us. We're doctors. We have white laboratory coats. You people are ignorant morons. You should just take our word that vaccines are safe and so forth and so on. But you can smell the panic in the wind.
Yeah. There's a lot of, it seems like it's going to come to a head soon.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Well, NASA has finally grudgingly acknowledged there could be a link between solar output and climate here on the Earth. Well, duh. NASA's statement said in recent years, researchers have considered the possibility that the sun plays a role in global warming. After all, the sun is the main source of heat for our planet. Like we didn't already know that from high school science class? What it is the Earth is getting colder, and now everyone's looking for an escape hatch where they can say, well, humans were warming the Earth, but, you know, the sun is cooling and offset that, so we were still right. Sort of, kind of. Now, speaking of the CDC, they had been planning a climate summit, even though the Centers for Disease Control is not exactly known as an environmental institution. But they were going to try and sell this threat of human-caused global warming is a threat to human health, and we must do something about it. And I guess with all the snow and ice that we're getting this winter, they've had a change of heart because now they've canceled this summit on how human-caused global warming is a threat to all of us. Let's take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, I believe I really do know what was behind the Arab Spring, and that's exactly what we're seeing today. Caused turmoil in the Middle East, overthrow secular governments, as they did, well, first with Saddam Hussein. That was before the spring, but then, they tried so desperately to overthrow Assad, and they also, of course, overthrew Gaddafi in a very violent and savage way.
Yes.
And figured just like what we got now with the refugees, this would cause refugees and then cause turmoil in Europe.
Yes.
And in other parts of the world. That was exactly what they wanted. That's what they wanted. This is the New World Order. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about that's related to this is, I don't know if you ever heard of the Moriarties.
You mean outside the context of Sherlock Holmes?
No. This is a couple from Texas.
Okay.
That were in Libya and told everything they know about what happened. And it's a fairly new video now on YouTube with John B. Wells. You remember, he used to be in Coast to Coast.
Yes.
Got his own show now, Carolina Midnight. He's also got a radio show in Dallas on Saturday or Sunday. But anyway, they're saying, and I believe them, they gave a detail of everything that was happening in Libya, all the gun running, how the United States and NATO were trying to do everything they could to overthrow them, bombing them, using depleted uranium, just destroying the entire country. Had the highest cost, the highest standard of living in not only in the Arab world but in Africa, and one of the highest standards actually in the world. And it was a place where actually socialism actually worked. When you say socialism can't work, it did work there. And then, and how they overthrew it. And then when they got back to the United States, how they tried to intimidate them to shut up, including, listen to this now, you know what the Blaze is, Glenn Beck Station?
Yes.
So a bunch of people from the Blaze came over to give an interview, and they had somebody from the CIA there, and that CIA, I think, was a female employee of the CIA, or, I think Beck's employee of the CIA myself, but that's besides the point. She warned him, shut up about this, don't say anything, nobody cares what happened with Libya, don't spread it around if you want to keep healthy, something to that effect. Now, you can find it, the YouTube video is still on there. Matter of fact, I didn't even finish it yet. I got about half of it to go. I was watching it Sunday, but I didn't have time to finish it. And I'm telling you, it's very disturbing. And John B. Wells is no fluke. As a matter of fact, he's the one who's halfway funding Wolfgang Halpig and supporting him with going to court.
Yes.
Was going to court and all that, and has him on quite a bit. Wells is the real thing. He's the real deal. And I don't think this is a fluke. I don't think it's a fraud. I think basically this is, and the other thing I want to say is, I think Donald Trump should get busy and start getting the evidence he needs and start arresting Obama, Mr. Slick Willie, W. Bush, Bush's cronies, neocon cronies, and Bill Clinton for what happened in Serbia. I think we need to find out the truth. We need war crime trials and treason trials for these people. And I don't have that much faith that Trump's going to do it, but I sure hope he does, because we can't let these people get away with this.
No, we can't. We absolutely can't. And I would like to see Trump or Trey Gowdy launch these investigations and prosecutions. But let's be very honest here. Donald Trump has got some more pressing priorities right now, which is to calm this liberal crybaby phenomenon down and get our economy back on track and get people back to work. That has to be his top priority right now, and the rest is it's just going to have to wait. And I understand.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But maybe if people would find out the truth, it would shut these liberals up. At least true liberals, like you just pointed out, like your congresswoman there, was it Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah.
And who I wish Trump would have appointed as Secretary of State.
I agree.
And what Dennis Kucinich? These are true liberals, and they are, they're not a bunch of leftist communist freaks. They're real patriots, and I think they would start getting the word out too, because I really think it needs to be exposed. These people,
well, hang on.
Gotten away with literal murder.
It is being exposed in the independent media, and as our audience continues to grow, more and more people are starting to realize the extent to which they have been lied to their entire lives by the U.S. government and by the corporate media, and they're becoming skeptical, they're becoming analytical, and these are all very healthy trends.
They are, and I agree with you absolutely. And let's hope that the corporate media is going to be finished by the time next year.
It's tearing itself apart already.
Right now, unfortunately, it has still way too much influence. And that, by the way, when I talk about the corporate media, I include Fox, what I call Fox Neocon News.
Yes.
A little bit better than the others, but not much. They're kind of like the other side of the coin, but they're still very establishment, very pro-war, They will not get into this stuff about Libya, about Syria. They'll still lie and say Assad poisoned, gas his own people without, batting an eye about it. Just with a straight out lie.
Well, it may not be covert or overt control. It may just be looking at the pocketbook, because right now the corporate media, including Fox, are trapped. They can't admit they lied about anything in the past. They have to keep on supporting those lies or see their credibility erode even further than it already has. The instant anybody in the corporate media gets up and says, yeah, we knew Saddam didn't really have nuclear weapons, that's going to be it. They might as well, turn off the transmitters and close the doors.
But you see, the only major news channel that I see actually sends people to these war zones, like in Syria and Libya, and also into the Ukraine, even the eastern part of Ukraine, is RT. They're the only ones. Other than that, the corporate news, you just have some anchor. Sometimes it's probably an airhead of some kind that doesn't even know any better.
No, they're just reading what's off the teleprompter. They're using green screens. It's all theater. But you need to understand we're already past the watershed moment where the American corporate media has lost the majority of its audience to the independent media, to Russia Today, to Press TV. And we have to stop thinking of our society in the context of still being dominated by CNN, MSNBC, because they aren't. Only in their own minds and advertising are they still something to be reckoned with.
I just want to ask you something about that. I trust RT. I think it's one of the best in the world. Do you really completely trust Press TV, though?
I don't trust anybody at this point, but when I get a story from anybody, even Russia Today, I try and find an independent verification on that. So at this point, trust is a very dangerous thing, because throughout history, everybody who got used, abused, lied to, double-crossed, or betrayed had it done to them by somebody they thought they could trust. So no, I don't trust any corporate media, any independent media. I am going to go out and look at the facts for myself and make my own choices.
By the way, one of the best reporters, two best reporters I think that RT has is Maria. I think her name's Fukushima. She's excellent. She's pretty hot looking too, as good looking as any of the others in the corporate media with a brain. And the other one is Murat Gaspiev. These people go right in the middle of the worst kind of stuff, especially in Syria.
All right, we're going to have to let you go, Mark. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as I mentioned earlier in one of the phone calls, Donald Trump has appointed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to a special commission on vaccine safety. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has accepted the position, and the big pharmaceutical corporations, the medical industrial complex, is having cows at this point. And Robert Kennedy Jr., well, he's going to need a lot of backup from the Department of Justice to start prying documents loose from the CDC, get some of these scientists to testify before Congress, especially that one who admitted that the CDC report saying that vaccines do not cause autism was a fraud. And already the vaccine makers are out there with a media campaign. Oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's just a politician. Actually, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has spent a great deal of his life studying this issue very closely. And they're trying to sell you science as a religion. Listen to me and believe me, because I'm wearing a white laboratory coat and I have a clipboard. Therefore, my word is law, whether it's vaccine safety, GMO safety, human-caused global warming. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call from Evelyn in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha, Mike, and thanks for taking my call. Mike, I wanted to ask you a question about this Purple Revolution, and being that you're going to have Wayne Madsen on, when Hillary came out on November 9th, she declared, along with George Soros, the Purple Revolution. And in there, they did mention that they were going to make his first, President Trump's first 100 days a nightmare, to the point, I've read so many things on this Purple Revolution, to the point that they would make him resign in his first 100 days. Now, my question was with Wayne Madsen, because he was one of the two people who had an article out, shortly after November 9th. Anyway, there's others since then, but my question to him is, what does this mean in terms of, because since then I've seen everybody with purple attire, purple ties, purple this, purple that, purple. I even seen purple clouds the day after with the weatherman. It was just extraordinary. But my question is that Donald Trump is also wearing purple, and Nigel Farage, I don't know if Wayne Madsen knows this, but Nigel Farage wrote a book, The Purple Revolution, in 2015.
Well,
so it seems like when...
Yeah, let me back up here a little bit because we're also almost at the top of the hour here. I know about Hillary and Soros. I'm not seeing Donald Trump wearing purple. He wears a lot of blue. But obviously, if he is the target of the Purple Revolution, he's not going to be part of it. But, yeah, it's a declaration by George Soros. They're going to try a Maidan here in the United States of America. And I don't think they can succeed because the public image of these revolutionaries is such a negative one, they're not going to get any popular support. Thank you for the phone call, Evelyn. We got to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're just getting word that Rex Tillerson has been confirmed as the new Secretary of State. So all these dire warnings about stalling Trump's appointments does not seem to be coming to pass. And they're definitely moving forward on all of that. Now, at this point, the corporate media, they're grasping at straws. And apparently, somebody got a clip of a video of Melania Trump looking upset at one point during the inauguration festivities. So they put this video out and say, what do you think Donald Trump said to her that made her this upset? They're just trying to generate negative impressions, and they don't have anything to go on here. Now, getting on back to the issues of science and health, there's a story from Fathead Movie. And it's talking about how consumers are starting to wise up about all these chemicals and fillers and less than wonderfully healthy additions to our corporate food, and they're changing their shopping habits. And they're talking about Kroger's supermarkets have introduced a line of their own house brand foods under the brand name Simple Truth, and they're basically processed a lot less than what you would find in other brands, and apparently these are very, very successful, and this Kroger's line of Simple Truth food is being sold by Safeway. I got to look for it down there, Wegmans, and Walmart, and apparently this line of minimally processed food has grown to $1.2 billion in annual sales in just 2 years. And now that I think about it, I think I have seen them. I didn't realize it was from Kroger's. Now, there is a great deal of concern about North Korea, and no, I don't mean nuclear missiles and the rest of it. There is a supervolcano on the border between China and North Korea. It's called Mount Paektu. And apparently it is showing indications of possible eruption well beyond what we're seeing at Yellowstone. And apparently the North Korean government is so concerned about this that it has dropped its attitude of strong borders and we don't need your help. And it have actually said to other scientists in the West, would you please come help us figure this out? Because if that were to blow, North Korea would basically vanish from the map. And there has been a lot of seismic activity around the globe lately. They had another magnitude 8 quake down there in the Solomon Islands. And my concern is there's a lot of this activity in the Solomon Islands, and then up by New Guinea is the other end of that exact same fault structure. That's getting a lot of activity. If that whole fault system were to unzip, as it were, we could see some pretty significant tsunamis. Now, so far, all of these Solomon Island quakes are too deep to cause tsunamis, so we don't get any warnings about any of this stuff here. Now, apparently, Donald Trump has inherited the keys to the drone fleet, and apparently the first U.S. drone strikes on Trump's watch have hit Al-Qaeda in Yemen and ISIS. Obviously, Donald Trump is a much better shot than Barack Obama was. Apparently, Obama, on his way out of the office, as it were, tried to pass a lead ammunition ban. We've been talking about this for a while, and the rationale behind it is that lead is very toxic, which we all know it is. And the idea being that if the bullet doesn't kill you, the lead poisoning will. And there was a push to force people to buy and use tungsten ammunition. The problem with that being that tungsten is very, very hard compared to lead, even copper-jacketed lead, and would wear out your gun barrels very, very quickly. So it's expected this lead ammunition ban is probably not going to last very long, nor should it. Now, we haven't really heard all that much from Donald Trump about his views on the Second Amendment and gun rights. We've certainly seen a lot of pictures of Donald Trump with firearms. But I think he's going to be much more beholding to that Constitution and Bill of Rights than his predecessor. I think when Donald Trump got up there and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, that he really meant it, as opposed to some of his predecessors like George W. Bush, who declared the Constitution a blankety-blank piece of paper. So we'll see what happens with there. Apparently over in Illinois, we got to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And by the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now's your chance to call on in with whatever your comments and concerns are. There has been a bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, over in Great Britain, where apparently in June of last year, there was an accident with a Trident nuclear missile, misfiring, going the wrong way. Obviously no nuclear detonation, but apparently it was kind of hushed up, and it's now a huge embarrassment for Theresa May, and apparently another embarrassment because this story was leaked by the United States government to the American press, and that's put a strain on British and American relations. And I think underlying that is this idea that maybe some of these weapon systems, both in Great Britain and the United States, are not worth the money that was put into them. We know that during this power projection into the Middle East, a lot of the British warships ran into trouble because their cooling systems were designed to operate in the much colder waters of the North Atlantic. And when they got down there into the Gulf waters or even the Mediterranean, the cooling systems were inadequate. And they literally had to shut the engines down every once in a while and let them cool. And that seems rather short-sighted to spend the money on a warship and sort of build in that it's only going to be out here in the North Atlantic, especially given how chaotic the world actually is. There is no question that there's a huge amount of waste going on in the military-industrial complex, and I'm sure that's true for every nation with a major military-industrial process. Now, countries like Russia and China have reined it in, and they tend to get more bang for their buck for their weapons. Here in the United States of America, it's open season on the taxpayer. Huge sums of money being poured into very questionable projects. And we know all the old story about how by the time a nut or a bolt gets to the weapon, it's military procurement has it up to $25, $30, $700 toilet seats. It really is a ridiculous process, and it's very, very wasteful. And if we're ever going to get this economy back under control, we need to make the building and development of weapons far more business-like. And, of course, Trump is already making noises in that area. He's already gotten Boeing to back off on the cost of the new replacement Air Force One aircraft. And now everybody who's a contractor on the F-35 is saying, well, you know, maybe we can scale the price back just a little tiny bit. But I had personal contact with this process both years ago when I was with NASA and then when I was in Hollywood. This company that I worked for was actually hired by one of the Strategic Defense Initiative contractors to create a simulation to show Congress. And it is just amazing, the amount of money that gets spent and wasted. Now, when I was back with NASA, one of the projects I worked on was to create a phase-stable link between the radio telescopes at Goldstone and the radio telescope that back then was up on the Table Mountain Observatory. It's not there anymore. And this required us to install some phase-locked repeaters at what were called Gator sites in the desert. Now, the Gator system is a radio network so that warplanes flying up and down the coast of California are always in communication with their command structure. These days it's done over satellites, but back then it was these little shacks in the middle of the desert, and we're out there using some of their rack space for our phase-stable link. And the military people who were there needed some diodes. And so they called down to the supply depot, and they say, we really need these diodes. When can you get them out there? And they said, well, the next scheduled truck shipment to your location is a month from now. And they said, can't you expedite it? And he says, I can only send out a special truck if it's above a certain weight load. And so the guys at the Gator site will fill the truck up with whatever you don't need anymore, get it over the weight limit, and send it over here. And the next day a truck shows up, and they unload, and they unload, and they unload, and they unload, and they unload. And we have a stack of crates that's actually bigger than the physical building that all the radio equipment is going in. So the military people called down and said, look, we can't even store this stuff. Can you come pick it up again? And the guy says, well, yeah, maybe 2 weeks. Then they said, some of our guys could use some of this equipment. Can we just take it? And they said, yeah, it's all obsolete anyway. Help yourself. By the time the truck finally got back there, there was like a box of paper clips. And some of the stuff was in there was like these master specialty switches, you know, the rectangular switches that light up when you touch them. Those were $35 each. And we're talking 1970s, 1980s dollars. There were these giant radio triode tubes. I don't even know what they went for. Gigantic heat sinks. It was just amazing. If you went to try and buy this stuff, it would have been a fortune. So that was my first exposure to the excesses of government spending with your tax dollars. And then the second one was when I was working with Robert Abel & Associates. And toward the end of that company's existence, they split off a special division for industrial/military contracting. And I got put over on that one. And we got hired by one of the contractors on the Strategic Defense Initiative to create a simulation of battle management. And we got the set designer from the movie War Games to come on in and just basically recreate that set, because that's not what Cheyenne Mountain looks like in real life. And wrote all this software to simulate all of this stuff. And I'd already seen this stuff before, but for the rest of the crew, you know, every week we were flying out to Colorado from Hollywood. And they were looking at just all this huge amounts of money that we're pouring into this thing. And you can literally see the shock on their face. Because for ordinary Americans, money is like having an eyedropper full of water. You have a drop here on the car payment, and a drop here on the mortgage payment, and a drop here for the kids' dental work. And these people in the military, they have got fire hoses. And they're not afraid to use them. It really is out of control. And I think one thing that Donald Trump seriously needs to look at is a more cost-effective, efficient military procurement system. And again, if you have not seen it, there's a wonderful movie called The Pentagon Wars. And it was written by somebody who was actually at the Pentagon and part of the procurement process for the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle. And he wrote a book about it. The book was a hit. They made a movie about it. And it's a funny movie, but it's actually based on how this stuff really happened. It really is a scam. And what do we get for it? We get weapons like the F-35. Still can't fly in the fog, can't fly in the rain, can't fly near lightning. The helmet system still can't merge the views from all the cameras on the outside of the plane. The networked radar system can't tell if it's dealing with one target or several. The software for the gun won't be ready until at least the end of 2018, maybe 2019. And it has a bad habit of setting its own engines on fire during takeoff. The latest aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, they're now grudgingly saying it may never actually be suitable for use in real combat. All the whiz-bang high-tech they put in there, they can't get that to work. The magnetic rail catapult apparently is giving such a shock to the aircraft during launch, it's actually breaking these aircraft, which are designed to be launched by steam catapult. But apparently the magnetic catapult, that initial punch, is much harder than they expected. When the first version of the naval version of the F-35 came on out, it actually couldn't land on a carrier. The arrestor hook was too close to the main landing gear. The main landing gear would slap the wire down on the deck, and the hook would hop over it. Independence-class littoral combat ships, corrosion problems. Freedom-class littoral combat ships, drivetrain problems. The Zumwalt stealth destroyer, drivetrain problems. There's room for a lot of improvement here in terms of lowered costs and higher quality. And even if we're not going to be fighting a war with anybody, America's weapons remain one of our top exports. They've been in decline lately ever since Russia and China started showing off their stuff. But we have to make better weapons at lower cost if we're going to maintain that part of our economy. And at the moment, as much as we may dislike war, armaments manufacturing is still big business in the United States. So we go with that now while we try and rebuild other aspects of our economic health. Bringing back the car manufacturing, bringing back electronics manufacturing. And I still maintain that what Donald Trump should do with NASA, or whatever is left of NASA, possibly with a new name, a new title, and a new management, is recreate that civilian technology incubator that we had during the Apollo program that gave us the new products and the new technologies that led to the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. These other countries that have taken the lead in manufacturing products developed by America back during Apollo are not going to be foolish enough to let it come back here without a fight. So we have to leapfrog ahead into whatever's going to be next. Photonics, new materials, see if there's actually something useful you can do with aerogels. Nanotechnology. We're going to definitely have to do that. All righty, let's see. Walmart is cutting 1,000 jobs at their headquarters. Apparently their supply chain is being re-evaluated, which may mean that longer delays getting your goodies to these big box stores here. And believe it or not, somebody has actually filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump because his hotels accept foreign money when foreign guests stay there. That is just absolutely ridiculous. And remember, Donald Trump has turned over all of his businesses to his sons. But I mean, they're just grasping at straws, trying to find something that the public will resonate with so that they can go after Donald Trump. Apparently, China's been caught lying about their gross domestic product. They're admitting the numbers are fake. Well, join the club. Our government lies about inflation and unemployment. So, anyway. Let's see. We already talked about Sean Spicer. Bill Mitchell is out there saying, what does the left think these protests mean anything? They lost. They control nothing. It's like booing after the game has ended. And again, if this is the beginning of a color revolution, it's going to fail because the general public is not going to sympathize with, identify with, or support all these liberal whining cry babies. We have to take a break for commercials. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. A lot of things going on. I'm going to step back in the normal order of points and get some stories that are coming on in. Over at the White House, as you know, they have this petition page. Obama had it. Trump is continuing it. One of the first petitions to be set up is calling for a new investigation into the events of 9/11 and is asking for this investigation to incorporate the forensic evidence offered by architects and engineers for 911truth.org. And this is a very good group. They've done a lot of groundbreaking work on this. I'm not really sure that we need a new investigation. We know what happened. We know the government lied to us. I don't intend to sit here and wait for the government to acknowledge what I already know. I refuse to cede that authority to them, even to Donald Trump here. But the petition has just been started, and hopefully it's going to be taking off here in the very, very near future. Still has a 100,000 signature limit that it needs to reach. But let's go ahead and pass this one around. Let's make this one go viral out there and see what kind of a response that we get here. Now then. As you know, during all of this kicking and screaming about the elections and all the fraud that was uncovered and never remarked on, it turns out that, too, may be about to change underneath the Trump administration. The U.S. Department of Justice has just launched a lawsuit alleging that election fraud took place up in New York to ensure that Hillary Clinton could steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders. And we know that stuff was going on. We also know that during all this nonsense about recounts by Jill Stein, they found evidence of pro-Hillary fraud in all of those states as well. TrueTheVote.org and VoteFraud.org both ran their own studies on the voter databases, the registration, and discovered at least 3 million non-citizens voted in that election. And we know what's going to happen. The corporate media is going to stand up and say, oh, there's no election fraud in this country. That's anybody saying that the elections might not be honest. That's an attack on democracy in America itself. But as I mentioned to that caller earlier in the show, Voters News Service, which is a privately owned company that counts our elections and tells us who our leaders are, is owned jointly by the corporate TV news networks and a couple of top newspapers. They're part of the problem. They are never going to admit there's election fraud in this country, even when it's right there in your face that the fraud took place. Oh, it's a mechanical error. It's calibration issues. Whatever euphemism they want to use. They won't admit it. And I don't think we're going to hear a whole heck of a lot about this lawsuit up in New York. But if they hit pay dirt, I think it would be time for a full investigation into the elections during the primaries in all 50 states. Now, I'm sure Donald Trump knows that he fought an uphill battle against election fraud to win that White House, which is why I am hoping that he will devote some effort, possibly set up a special commission to completely overhaul the election system and turn it back into something we, the American people, can have confidence and trust in. Because after all that we've seen over the last years, going all the way back to Bill Clinton's term in office and the book Vote Scam by the Collier brothers, we know stolen elections are a reality in this country. It is time for it to stop. Now, Donald Trump is already talking about running again in 2020. He's already got his new slogan, Keep America Great. So unless Trump and his administration can overhaul the election system, he's going to lose in 2020 because they'll just double up on it. Instead of 3 million non-citizens voting, they'll have 6 million non-citizens voting. They'll fudge those electronic voting machines by twice as many people. They'll disenfranchise twice as many GOP voters. Whatever it takes. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I was just watching the news crawl on Fox News, and apparently a lot of investigations are being launched. And we'll dig into those and see what they're going to be about. I honestly did think that Trump would hold off on that while he gets the economy and everything back in order. But it looks like some of these investigations are launching now, one over at the State Department and so forth and so on. So let's talk about election fraud here, because this is going to become a major focus for my website and my radio show right now. Because we have, for the first time in decades, a president who understands election fraud is a problem and will be again for him in 2020. Now, I'm setting a 2-year schedule to get the election system overhauled because of those midterm elections. Because election fraud, stolen elections, are not just confined to the presidency. There are a lot of these perpetual politicians that always seem to anger people, and yet somehow they always get reelected again, like John McCain or Harry Reid. And you have to wonder, are those elections being stolen? So how are we going to have honest elections? Well, first of all, let's start out with the reality that we acknowledge our election system is open to fraud. It's designed to conceal fraud. Let us understand election fraud is a reality, and speculating about it or talking about it is not, in fact, a threat to democracy and America. Guaranteeing the honesty of our elections is what protects democracy and America, contrary to those liberal whiners over there. Now, remember what Stalin said. It's enough that people know there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. Election fraud is unfortunately part of the process. We need a system that designs the potential for fraud down to an absolute minimum. And I refuse to accept that the nation that put men on the moon cannot come up with an accurate, fair, honest, verifiable election system. If it is this crooked and this wide open to fraud, it is intentional. Now, Bev Harris over at blackboxvoting.org has found in that GEM system, the Diebold system, 12 separate ways the outcome of the election could be changed without leaving any indication of fraud. Diebold made its reputation with a line of bank automated teller machines that never lost a penny from one end of this country to the other. And there was always a paper trail. When you used one of their machines, you could hear inside the little printer chattering out a paper record. So, what I propose is crowdsourcing the counting of the elections. The elections are counted where the votes are cast. We're not taking boxes of ballots and shipping them across the county where they're open to substitution or tampering. No electronic voting machines. No centralized tabulation centers where if you try and peek in and see how the counting is going, you can be arrested. Basically, the system I envision for United States elections is everyone goes to their precinct where they're going to vote, and they show their ID, and they fill out a paper ballot, and then they dip their finger in a little bottle of dye. It takes about a week to go away, so you can't vote multiple times. And you have to show ID to prove you are a U.S. citizen and entitled to vote. Now, at the end of the day, the ballot boxes are opened right there where the votes were cast, and all the votes are added up in full view of representatives of all the candidates and any citizens who just want to sit in there. And the totals for that precinct are then posted publicly, where anybody can look at them. Then those numbers are sent up to, shall we say, the county level. You publish the precinct voting results in the local city newspapers. Then you add them up and post those totals in the larger city county newspapers. And then finally the state level media. And then the state totals are tallied and published in the national media. And anybody with a calculator can start at their own precinct and verify those numbers going from the ballot box all the way up to the final result. It makes every single American citizen a voting inspector. Now, I'm not going to say that this is absolutely going to end the possibility of fraud, but it will make it very, very, very difficult. Because if somebody tries to change a precinct total somewhere along that line, it's going to be noticed and commented on. Our current system appears designed to facilitate election fraud and then conceal it. This system goes the other way, to make it very, very difficult to do and very easy to spot when it happens. And I'm sure it could use some refinement, but there should be no part of the election system that is away from human inspection. And that's why no electronic voting machines, no central tabulation centers, because that's where all the games happen. And by the way, if you have not seen it, HBO did a documentary about Bev Harris and blackboxvoting.org called Hacking Democracy. And the final segment of it is actually available on YouTube, and that's where they go into an electronic, into a county voting center, and they just pick up one of these electronic voting machines, and they rig the outcome of the election on this machine without even touching that machine. And one of the elections workers is this lady who just breaks into tears because she worked there thinking she was preserving democracy, and all of a sudden realizes she's part of a system that is anything but democratic. So I'm going to be hitting this topic on a regular basis. I'd like you to get involved, and hopefully we can reform this election system so that U.S. citizens vote knowing their vote really does determine the outcome of the country, knowing that they're not voting against illegal immigrants and refugees, knowing that they're not having their votes erased in some computer memory. If we're going to make America great again, one of the first, most fundamental things we have to have is an honest, trustworthy election system. And if Trump does not get on board with this particular agenda, he will lose in 2020. So, now then, getting on back to politics. Apparently, Benjamin Netanyahu, like Hillary Clinton, has marked his success over the years by how much nefarious behavior he can get away with. But like Hillary Clinton, it may be coming to an end. And apparently, somebody has leaked videotapes of the relationship between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his family, the media, and billionaire bosses at home and abroad. And these basically, the tapes show him hobnobbing with the financial elite, and that gifts that Netanyahu received from wealthy friends were actually payments for favors, just like Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. Now, over in Brussels, they're reeling from the announcement by Donald Trump that he is going to fast-track a trade deal with Great Britain when Britain leaves the European Union. And, of course, Brussels was trying to arm twist Great Britain into keeping the open borders so the refugees could be dumped on them, and to force Britain to go on paying taxes to the European Union, even as they say we're not part of the European Union any longer. And the hammer that Brussels held over Great Britain was, we will cut off trade deal. And Trump just stepped in and said, that's okay, you can trade with us. And like Russia, Great Britain can trade with all those other countries that aren't going along with all this sanctions nonsense. So now, Brussels has declared by imperial edict that Britain is not allowed to have trade negotiations with Trump until they have formally left the European Union. Now, that's nowhere in the EU Charter. They're just making that up. I imagine Soros is feeling a little frustrated. What's the good of being a billionaire if you can't rule the world covertly here? Getting on back to the economic news, apparently Chili's is starting to lay off workers and is getting ready to restructure as consumers reject unhealthy food chains. Hopefully McDonald's will take note of this as well. Because unfortunately, these restaurant chains and indeed even supermarkets have gotten very careless and reckless. They're going to sell what they think they can make the most money on, and over the decades, it's become a very unhealthy diet. It's highly acidic. We know that monosodium glutamate actually makes you eat more, can trigger migraine headaches. Aspartame is actually a neurotoxin, and it also makes you gain weight because after eating it, you start craving real carbohydrates. Your body starts saying, oh, there's something sugar-like here, but this isn't it. I gotta have the real stuff. We need to go back to natural, healthy food, and it's going to be an uphill fight, especially against companies like Monsanto, which want to establish a trade monopoly on food with their genetically modified organisms. They want to own it all. They don't want natural organic food. They're perfectly happy the honeybees are dying off. The business model for America over the last couple of decades has become, we're going to manufacture poor products and then get the government to force you to buy them, whether it's GMO agriculture, dangerous vaccines, or Obamacare health insurance policies. Why do we need to bother making a quality product at a good price? We'll just get the government to order people to buy this stuff. Get politicians in California to order parents to stick their kids with these vaccines. Get the federal government to ban GMO labeling. You can see how that works. And by the way, that really is fascism. You see all these liberal whiners out there screaming that Donald Trump is a fascist? No, he isn't. Fascism is when corporate interests and government interests are aligned together against the general population. We've been living under fascism for decades. Donald Trump's a capitalist. He wants to turn the United States of America back into a business-like entity where everybody's working, everybody is making money, everybody has the right to a comfortable lifestyle by their own effort, not by government handout. And that's a good model, because look at all these whiners in the streets of America right now and realize this was the liberal, globalist, socialist ideal for the human race. Just go on out and whine and scream and wait for some politician to say, oh, you're going to get some extra money because you're being oppressed by something imaginary. And there's one problem with socialism. It always fails when they run out of other people's money. And that's really the problem, why socialism never could perpetuate. Sooner or later, you have so many people just accepting government handouts, and too few people actually producing, and it's going to come apart. We need to get back to capitalism, which is where if you want to work, you make money and you get to keep it. And with that, if you start a business and you fail, you are responsible for that debt. You don't stick the taxpayers with it. Because true freedom means the freedom to succeed and the freedom to fail and the responsibility to accept either outcome. That's what true freedom is. It's not always an upside. But if you're going to be free, you have to be a responsible, free human being in your business, in your work, in your family. And I think we definitely have reached a point where we need to get government out of personal decisions. And we certainly need to get rid of politicians who create imaginary hobgoblins so that people can blame their own failings on these imaginary hobgoblins and then demand special treatment and handouts and all the rest of it because of the imaginary hobgoblins. And as I said before, if you think having elected Donald Trump to the White House is going to change everything all by itself, you're living in a dream world. He is clearly fighting an adversarial corporate media. He is fighting an obstructionist Congress. He has set himself opposed to virtually every special interest group in this country. And he's not going to be able to do a thing unless we, the American people, stand shoulder to shoulder with our President Donald Trump. And we need to get out in the streets and stand up there and say, yes, Donald Trump is my president. He won the election. Deal with it. And remember that if you do go out there in public, you become part of the public face of the Trump administration. If you behave with restraint and respect, people will respond to that. If you sink down to the level of the liberal whiners setting Trump supporters' hair on fire, then you will actually be very damaging to Donald Trump and his popular support. We have to be better than the other guys. We are better than the other guys. It's time we own that. We all, working together, were able to defeat an entrenched oligarchical elite that perpetuated its power with lies, fraud, deception, and massive election cheating. So, we're on the doorstep of a new era for the United States. We all have to have the courage to step through that doorway. Because they're not going to make it easy. The elites are feeling cornered, desperate. They are nowhere near ready to surrender and give up their dreams of a global government. And we must always be on guard. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just got an interesting email from somebody up in the Netherlands basically saying that the election system I just got done describing is what they're doing in the Netherlands. Apparently, they got rid of the electronic voting 5 years ago. And he says, basically, every precinct has 5 people from the community verifying 3 forms of ID. They get a ballot, fill in the choices, fold it, hand it back to them, and they put it in the box and count them at the end of the day right there and forward the results. So they're already doing this in the Netherlands. Why can't we do it here? And it's like I said before, I refuse to accept that the country that put men on the moon cannot come up with an honest, fair, accurate, reliable, verifiable election system. For our election system to be this opaque and wide open to fraud and unverifiable, it must be by design. Now then, apparently Oracle is laying off more than 1,000 employees. And Kroger, on the other hand, we were talking about them in their new Simple Truth line of minimally processed food. They're filling 10,000 permanent positions. And they're a good market. We don't have them here in Hawaii, unfortunately. But when a few years ago I took Claire to Cincinnati for the World Choir Games, and they had a Kroger's there, and I just fell in love with the place. It was just absolutely amazing how wonderful that market was. And I'm seeing a lot more comments here about Spicer, just reading the corporate media, the Riot Act, and it needs that. So, all of you Rivero's Rangers, here's your assignment. We need to work together to undermine what's left of the corporate media's credibility. And that means finding all these stories where it came on out that the media was playing dirty, like the ABC Food Lion scandal, the side-mounted fuel trucks and explosives one, Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. We just need to start putting that in front of every other American's eyes until they get the message. You cannot and you should not trust the corporate news media, because they are the ministry of propaganda for the U.S. government and various corporations. Now, time is on our side. They're already losing audience. They're trying to figure out some way they can silence the independent media and get away with it in the light of that First Amendment. But people want to know the truth. And all the expensive TV sets and cute blondes in tight-fitting clothes aren't going to stop that. People are going to go where they think they're going to find out what's really going on. I need your help for that. All right, there's the music. Time for me to say goodbye for today. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Aloha, America.